Bom dia!
Bom dia!
Everybody awake?
Yes!
If not, I can't reach you. I was sharing earlier that some of the old Protestant churches in the old days, they would have an usher that had a long stick, and at the end of the stick there was a feather. And if you were sleeping during the sermon, he'd go and tickle your nose to wake you up. Good. Today, I can really say Shabbat Shalom because the Jewish people are celebrating their Sabbath today. So to all of you, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
God said to Abraham when he was still in Ur in the Chaldees, which is modern day Iraq, he said to him, "Go to a land that I will show you." And that's my goal today, or with Israel, is to show you a land through the Word of God. That's my goal, to show you that and to take you through the land. I'm going to do a quick review because they say you forget 90% of what you hear. So I'm going to do a quick review of 2 weeks ago. Let's start with slide number 1. I spoke, remember, about, the name. You want to know the new name. Okay. Get that? Time out with Israel. And the reason why I chose that, I guess that's a baseball term where they go, time out. Just take a few minutes to, get away from what you're doing and to concentrate on whatever the new rules or whatever, to take time to learn the new techniques they want you to use. So during this Bible study, we're going to take some time out with Israel. And this way we don't have this 5-minute hanging over me all the time. So that's our new thing, time out with Israel.
That means 1 hour.
Yeah, that means yeah, it sets no time limit, right? I don't like to be under pressure like that. And we can't put a time limit on God,
Clock.
What about it?
Clock is over there.
Yes, okay. All right. That's good. Thank you, Mel. I need that. Time goes by fast when you're having fun. It really does. So let's quickly go through slide number 1. I talked about Israel as the center of the world. You all remember that? It says, this is what the sovereign Lord says. This is Jerusalem, which I have set in the city of nations, with countries all around her. Center of nations, with countries all around her. Okay? God said it. There's a favorite expression, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. It really shouldn't go in that order. It should go, God said it, that settles it, so I believe it. What God says, that settles it. Okay, I'm not going to argue with God said. God said it's the center of the world. So it is. Where is Israel? Next, we went through that. We know Israel is not in Portugal.
Spain.
It's not in Spain. It's not in Russia, and it's not in Brazil. You did learn that. That's good. We need a bigger pulpit here. I'll get back to it. Okay. Well, let's see if this works. Israel is so tiny that this little red dot is almost too big. It's right in there. Can you see that? That's Israel. And I pointed out how it connects Europe, Asia, all of Asia, and Africa. Now, does anybody know where Egypt is? This is good to know. Yeah, I know, Rodrigo, you know where Egypt is. He's our expert in geography. Egypt is in Africa. How many people knew that? Come on, be honest. You didn't know it was in Africa? Well, here it is. This is Africa, right? Egypt is right there.
It looks like Brazil.
Yep, it looks like
No, geography.
Okay, so you see that the Nile River it's hard to hold this steady, but the Nile River, here, this is Egypt where the pyramids are, and there's little Israel, okay? So everybody in Africa who wanted to get anywhere had to go through Israel. From here, they had to go through Israel, because this is all desert, it's hard to get through there. Of course, you could take a boat and go all the way around, whichever, it's a long way with a boat. But we know now that Israel is right there, it's the center of the world. Because God said so. I also mentioned that Israel is a small country. It's about 50 miles across. We'll do the next one, 50 miles across. Remember I showed you Argentina, and that's how big Israel is. It's a very small country right there. Okay, we're just reviewing. And then I ended last week by saying that Jerusalem is so important that God put his name in the city of Jerusalem by putting those 3 valleys that look like a W, and they connect to form God's, that symbol means God's name. So God put his name in the city of Jerusalem. 1 Kings 11:36. Okay, now we're starting new stuff today. Next. See, it says lesson number 2, time out with Israel. The next thing is, how did Israel begin as a Jewish nation? Next. Okay, we start with Abraham's journey. Abraham, right here, he came from Ur of the Chaldees, which is modern-day Iraq. Now, whether Ur is exactly there, we don't know. They have all kinds of stories. It could be here, it could be there. But basically, most people agree that it's probably in this area in southern Iraq. So what happened was, Abraham's father was Terah, and he decided, and also Abraham had 2 brothers. One of them died, so the father said, the father wanted to go to the land of Canaan. So he took Abraham and his remaining son, and they journeyed up this way from Ur. And you say, well, to go to Israel, Israel's like right here. Why didn't they just go this way? Well, you notice I went right through the Arabian desert. That's not a good way to travel. That's why I told you the travel routes followed this way. And this is the Fertile Crescent, which means it was a very fertile area. You got the Tigris and Euphrates River there. So it was a more pleasant way to travel. So the father took his family, and they went all the way to Haran, which is still in Iraq. And there the father died. He was 225 years old. So he never made it to Canaan. And that's when God spoke to Abraham the first time, saying, go to a land that I will show you. And he said, don't bring all the extended family with you. Just basically take your immediate family, go to the land I will show you. You know, Abraham didn't have any children yet then, but he had a cousin named Lot. And you're saying, well, isn't he disobeying God by taking Lot? Because God said, don't take your family. Well, in those days, like I told you, Abraham's brother had died, and that was his son, Lot. So in those days, when your brother died, you were pretty much responsible as the brother to take care of the wife and the children. So that's why he had Lot with him. That was basically his immediate family. So from here, count down to okay, so from Haran, he started heading down toward the Promised Land and came into this area, which is the land of Canaan, which is, where did they settle the first time? Not settle, but he stopped. Bethel, which means house of God. And there God spoke to him there when he told him, go to a land that I will show you. He also said to him, I will make you a great nation. So they get down, he travels, and he gets to Bethel here in Israel. And God speaks to him again. God spoke to him several times, promising a son and, all of this. But just to show you that this is when he was called to go to Israel. Thus, God is beginning the plans to establish the nation of Israel. Now, Abraham had to go through a bunch of things. Once he got to Canaan, there was a massive famine, so they had to go to Egypt, and there's a whole story there. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you can read it. Then he comes back to the Promised Land. Now, let's go to the next slide. There again, you can see the journey he took from Ur of the Chaldees, if it was there, but it was somewhere in Iraq. He traveled up to Haran. His father died there, and from there he left the rest of his extended family, because God told him to, In those days, they probably had a huge tribe, a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, left them all behind. and then he went to Israel to fulfill God's plan for his life. Now you can see here I talked about the Fertile Crescent. You see the Tigris and Euphrates River here, and then you have the Jordan River going down Israel. Then you have the Nile River. So it's all green along this area, which is called the Fertile Crescent. Now crescent is, I don't know if you're familiar with that word, but it means C shape. Okay, it's like the moon when it starts waning and it gets a C. So you can kind of see, you know, how it goes in a C shape. So when you hear the Fertile Crescent, that's what we're talking about, which is also the travel route that everyone took. Now, Abraham was the patriarch of the Jewish people. Now, patriarch is I'll read it. It's a male head of a family or a tribe. It was a very respected name. When they called you the patriarch of a family, that was a big honor. And you see that term used mostly in biblical terms. You don't say, oh, my father's the patriarch of our family. It just doesn't quite fit in. It's really an honor name. Now, the Jewish people have 3 patriarchs. Can you name them? Come on now.
Abraham, Moses. No, Moses, no one.
Well, we know Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Oh, I got it. Oh, my God.
3 That's going to be on the test, so please remember that.
Oh.
Ding! When I ring the bell, you have to remember that. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And actually, Abraham he bought a cave in Hebron, which is in Israel, and that's where the 3 patriarchs are buried. And now that's under Palestinian control, and it's very dangerous sometimes for Jews to go there, although they do go. But, you know, there's a lot of happenings that happen there. So the 3 patriarchs are buried in Israel. So Abraham left at age 75, and he goes to the Promised Land, and eventually goes to Egypt and works his way up. And God said, I'm going to give you this land. Every place you look and put your feet, I will give you this land. Well, what happened? Let's go to the next one. Okay, you see this area here? The brown part? You all see that?
Yeah.
That's Israel today. This is what God promised them, all in the red part. That's what they should have. And they don't have it. Why? Well, because, first of all, when they sent the 12 spies out from Egypt, they're getting ready to conquer the Promised Land. God says, I'm going to give you this land. Sent out 12 spies, 10 come back and say, oh, we can't do it. There's spies in the land, whatever. There are giants, there are this and that. We just can't do it. Well, God said, I'm going to give it to you. So their doubt and disobedience caused them to lose a lot of what they should have had. That's what they should have had. And you notice it encompasses a good part of Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and today these are all Arab Muslim countries which are arch enemies of Israel. You can see Turkey, all of them, they're all surrounding Israel, Egypt, all Muslim countries. And they have vowed, the Muslim countries, and this statement was made in 1948 by the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, Israel became a nation in 1948, right? The United Nations, that's another one, ding, put that down. Israel became a nation in 1948, and when the United Nations voted on that, all the Arab nations said, we don't want this. We're going to push them into the sea. And like I told you, Israel is only at its widest point right here. It's only 50 miles across, and right now, and it's about 500 miles, I think it's 350 miles up and down. And this white part here is really Palestinian control. And this is Judea and Samaria, right, where Abraham set foot and built an altar to God when he first went to the Promised Land. The enemy wants to take away what God promised to the children of Israel. So when you look at the news today and they say, oh, you got to give the Palestinians their land, this and that. No, God gave them this, all that white part, and by right they should have all of this. At least let them have this small amount of land. And, you know, the Arabs have 20 nations around them. Why do they want to take the little part that God has promised Israel? Because the devil wants to steal everything that God puts his hand on. So when you say, well, you're dealing with politics, we're not dealing with politics, we're dealing with the Bible. What God said, this is your land. And God said, in the last days, I will gather all the nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will judge all the nations that came against Israel. Why? Because they divided my land. Okay, so when you're talking to people, say, this isn't political, this is biblical, and it's the devil from day one trying to undo everything God wanted to do. Next. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto your descendants have I given this land, from the rivers of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. I showed you that whole outline. And he's also saying you're going to come into battle with all these tribes. Ites, you notice they all end in ites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Amorites. Ites means it belongs to the family of. These are all tribes. And they're going to have to overcome these once they leave Egypt and get into the promised land. You know how many ites there are in the Bible? 193 ites in the Bible. So that's your homework. I want you to write down all the 193 ites there are in the Bible. You can do it. You can do it. Next. So you notice he described that you're to have the land all the way to the Euphrates, and I showed you that in the outline. This is Israel today. Can you see that faint line all the way around? Can you see it? Black, black. That's Israel today. When the children of Israel left Egypt and went to the promised land, they divided the land into the 12 tribes. And you notice some of them are outside of Israel today. They've been taken over. So they even that small amount of land, they still don't have all the tribe areas that they should have. Next. To show you how important Israel is, I have this verse. For the Lord has chosen Jacob to be his own. He has chosen Israel to be his treasured possession. God is saying Israel is my treasured possession. So whatever is precious to God should be precious to us. Amen.
Amen. Amen.